I will now invite one of the speakers, and the second one will join us later on because he's coming. He's in a car from the airport right now, so I will just introduce him when he's coming. But now let me introduce Dennis Karpes. You might have seen him earlier on the main stage, but anyhow, we'll have a more in-depth conversation, and we'll have actually the chance to ask questions and exchange some ideas. Oh, okay. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, Dennis. Let me introduce you briefly. So Dennis is a co-founder of Just Diggit. He's actually digging. He's actually digging the landscape in Africa. He's doing landscape restoration programs in Africa. And what could be said is like he's greening the desert of Africa. Maybe say it like that. It sounds cooler. He actually has a long career in social change and social entrepreneurship. He started his career in the corporate world as marketing director for a clothing brand, but then his passion for social change took him to co-design a sustainable fashion brand. And then he used his DJ skills. He's also a DJ. He used his DJ skills to build a global movement raising awareness about HIV. Now he's leading this global project on landscape regeneration in Africa, and I guess we'll discuss more about that. Nature is actually the common point with the other speaker. Florin will join us later on, and I will take the chance to introduce him when he arrives. So I will start the conversation by, yes.
I was not. So, thanks. I don't know if everybody was at Dennis's session. So if we have...
You really missed something there.
I know. And that's why my request, if you could in 3-5 minutes, if we have time, to just summarize your session, to make like a small recap of that session. Is this possible?
He will actually tell us his story again. So yeah, it's no problem if you haven't been. We didn't plan it as if this is the second part. We've planned it as if this is the first part, right? Yeah. So I will start the question with a question for you. How many of you did or are doing something for 10 years without not seeing much results? Did you do something for 10 years without big results? For 5 years, maybe? Did you start a business and did something for 5 years without having a profit? Or another project? I thought a kid is that kind of a project. It takes you 10 years to actually see him going to school. Not much. Other than that, just expenses and emotions that you invest in a kid. That's kind of a project, so I think none of you either has kids or answers positively to this question, but Dennis here, he's that kind of a guy. So I'll invite him to tell us about his story from the last 10 years.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. And for those who missed the presentation, it's unfortunate, but let me give an elevator pitch. 10 years ago, I was ready for a new adventure, looking for something totally new, because in essence, I'm more a fire starter. I'm more a visionary type of person. I would like to build something totally new, have a new mission, try to involve as much as I can, people, corporates, companies, whatever. And 10 years ago, I entered the world of ecosystem restoration because of meeting someone. And that someone blew my mind. He became my business partner. He was active in Africa doing landscape restoration for already almost 15 years. I was blown away. He showed me his work. He showed me the before pictures and the after pictures. And straight away I could see that that work is connected to the most pressing issues of today, which is the food security, water scarcity, migration, and the climate itself. So within 1 hour, I said to him, I would like to be helpful to you for at least a decade. And this year, it's exactly a decade ago. And in those 10 years, I've had a wonderful ride, a bumpy ride, because I am not an ecologist, I am not an environmentalist, I am not a hydrologist, I am not even a soil specialist. I am just an energetic entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, committed to try to improve the status of our planet for many reasons. And I just dove into this world. I made a deep dive. But as I said, I like to make sure that many people are going to be involved who have this specialism on certain topics. So we work with the University of Wageningen or Singularity University or other scientists. So I'm a perfect example that you don't need to have that much of a knowledge on a certain topic in order to be successful to really try to create change. My suggestion or advice is always make sure that you're surrounded with people who are much better than you are. And what we are doing, we design and implement landscape restoration programs in Africa. And at the same time, we are trying to build a global movement to inspire the world and to activate the world to join this green revolution. And it has been an amazing journey until so far. I said this morning that for 8 years I had the wind right in my face, and the last 2 years I feel the wind in my back. And to be honest, that was the perfect timing, because after 8 years I was really getting tired of the fact that it was sometimes so difficult to make, you know, big changements, make positive movements. And it's amazing because this year the UN declared out of the General Assembly that from 2020 to the year 2030 it's going to be the decade on ecosystem restoration. And this decade should be known all around the globe. And so the timing is perfect. It's now high on the agenda. And the coming 10 years, I think many people will see that we are capable of doing restoration for Mother Earth and also, of course, for ourselves. And I think I'm gonna be very busy the coming decade.
Maybe
I already was very busy, but I'm gonna be more.
could you explain a bit more in detail what is ecosystem restoration? What does it mean?
Yes. Okay. Good question. So we are facing climate issues. We hear this every day for 25 years in a row. And 2 days ago, we broke another CO2 emission record. So climate change is happening. It's sort of an abstract thing. It's somewhere up there. And it affects millions of people. The driver, one of the driver behind this, is the climate itself, and are the droughts. And people say, like today, that we are here to try to regreen deserts. Well, that is actually not true, because why should I regreen the center of the Sahara or the Gobi Desert where no one is living? But so many places in the world, on every continent, are living in areas that are slowly becoming deserts. And there are a few 100 million people living in those ecosystems. And those ecosystems can be transformed. So our mission is to try to reverse those ecosystems from dry, degraded land back into green, lush fields again. And that is possible. That's the hopeful thing. That's the good thing. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and we are doing it. And the fundament of the work that we are doing is as old as humanity. Agriculture is maybe now 8,000 years old. Those techniques have been always here, because water has always been an issue, either with 1 billion people or 9 billion people. There's always too much or too less or polluted. And some of the techniques we implement, and who are a few thousand years old and who can really transform those dry land back into green, lush fields again in a relatively short time. And the fundament of our work is to manage the rainwater that still comes down in many ecosystems. And we try to bring the water subsurface, so underground, because there is a topsoil problem, not only in Africa, also in the northern parts of America, South America, Europe, because of massive deforestation, overgrazing, erosion, monocultivation. The soil is sometimes as hard as this concrete here on the floor. So when the rain comes down and it's not able to penetrate into the ground, it creates flooding, it creates more damage, infrastructure, more loss of fertile land. So the fundament of our work is to open up the soil. You have various digging techniques, almost like 30 techniques, and then we wait for the rains, we capture the rain, we stop the erosion, we refill the aquifers, and then as soon as the rain is subsurface, it starts to move, because it always would like to try to find the lowest point. So instead of runoff of a few meters water per second, it now slowly moves under the soil, maybe a few meters per year. And the water is there, and it cannot evaporate, and then you create an automatic way of reforestation. I wish I could show here the video again, but that's not possible. If I knew, then I just played the push button green. But water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, can be seen as an automatic way of reforestation. So it's low-tech, efficient, easy, no rocket science.
I would just want to point out that though Africa seems very far away, we have seen the desertification in Romania as well in the southern part. So it's not something.
It is
so
happening
far
everywhere.
away.
So we had, for me it was mind-blowing, because I'm doing this now for 10 years, and last year we had a huge drought problem in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and also in France. So, as an example, the bigger French wine producers are now buying huge plots of lands in England, because they know they cannot build their wine farms in the coming years in the south of France anymore, because of having too much droughts. So the climate is changing, and it affects not only Africa. You say Africa is far away. Africa for Europe is not far away. It's our neighbor continent, and it's really close. And Africa will double in population within 3 decades, from 1.3 billion to 2.6 billion within 2050. And I can tell you that the future forecast on migrations from Africa to Europe, because there's no other way they can go to, they can only go to Europe, are not so hopeful. And therefore I have a big passion for Africa for many reasons, but we decided only to become active in Africa. It's a huge continent, 55 countries, and out of the 55, 30 countries recognize that it's action time and that they need to try to restore their ecosystems ASAP, also specifically for their own benefit, because I've met so many ministers of water, agri, food, environment, and when you have those talks with those ministers from Africa in a few countries in Africa, then you hear what kind of migration they are facing every year within changing of the season. So there is something happening, and for Europe, it's also our concern.
This being given the situation, you've already mentioned what UN has in mind, but then what would be, in your opinion, the most pessimistic scenario? You just mentioned the fact that we've also surpassed another level of CO2 emissions, and we've seen climate crisis being declared today by the European Parliament.
Yeah,
so
that's
everyone
good. That's hopeful news. Well, I mean, I'm not a pessimist. I'm really an optimist. Sometimes naive, but that's good for me, because otherwise I will go crazy. But one of the most pessimistic scenarios is what I just sort of said. So if Africa will double, which is insane because now only Africa can give food for their own continent only for 75% of the people. So 25% of the total amount of the population in Africa is suffering. Ethiopia, 7 million people depending on food aid every day. Kenya, 3 million people. They say there will become a huge famine in Zambia and in other parts of Africa. So there is something happening. We don't read this quite often in the newspapers. So imagine this doubling in population in only a few decades. And I've seen some reports on this. So I read sometimes reports of the UN and the World Resource Institute, etc. They expect millions of Africans coming to Europe. And you cannot blame them. Because if you don't have any food and water and you're about to, to die, then you just, you move. And it's happening every day. Every day, Africans from deep South Africa all the way up going to Europe, and as soon as they arrive in Europe, they go totally mad because they did a crazy journey, and the expectations are millions, and that is apocalyptic. We cannot handle already a few thousand, so imagine a few millions. So and this is information that not many people know, and of course it's even sort of frightening, but it's happening, and it's not a matter of how, but it's more like when. No one really sort of knows, but it will come.
Thank you. I guess we should also look into a very optimistic scenario, because I assume that many of us are here to look at the future and actually learn how to build a better one. So what would be the most optimistic scenario? You already said you're an optimistic person, but it's like the best case scenario. How would that look like?
Well, the most optimistic or positive one is that we are fully aware that we need to be helpful to Africa, especially from a European perspective. So whether it's government, philanthropic, social ventures, even commercial activities. And then again, Africa is also a big opportunity because it has the fastest growing economies in the world. A few countries are growing really fast. So there are so many opportunities to be helpful and also for yourself. And then again, if I just said something about the population explosion, I hope that a few big NGOs are really diving on this topic of population growth. Because this is a serious theme that I hardly read some cool stuff about it, So in the most best scenario, you have also a few strong NGOs who try to tackle this population explosion. And of course, the fact that we can restore and that so many countries are acknowledging that, that's hopeful.
You've mentioned quite a couple of issues that are strongly linked to climate change, because it's a system complex issue. You've mentioned migration, population growth, economic problems, and ecosystems, so nature. You also mentioned UN and other organizations, NGOs, that could do something about it. But if you are to pick one deal breaker, that would be essential to transform the worst case scenario into the best one, or at least the current one that is not very optimistic either, into your best scenario. What would be that one, and how should it work?
That's a tough question.
Okay, let's make them two.
No, for me, that's a tough question to answer. But then again, to try to manage the population growth, I don't see it. I don't hear it. I don't read it, because it's also very connected to religion, etc. So it's a complex topic, but I think it's time for some organizations that need to step up and do something about it. We cannot grow forever.
This is really a tough question.
Yeah.
I see it coming maybe from questions to dig deeper into this. You've been also working in your past in the corporate world. Now you are on the opposite side, opposite not in the sense that they don't come together, but you are working from the as an NGO with the corporations. So I would like to know how do you think we could get corporations and companies in general, not only the large ones, but the small ones alike, to act more responsibly?
Yeah. Good question, and I think I have a quite clear answer because I'm in the midst of having those conversations with companies and corporates. The good thing is that we now have a new agenda, which is the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, which were brought to the world in 2015. So first we had the Millennium Development Goals. They were measured in the year 2015. They were changed to make it more relevant in a world like today. And now we have 17 pressing issues that we need to solve all together. This agenda is for everyone a priority. And I'm so happy to see, and this only happened the last 2 years, that suddenly this sustainable agenda is becoming more popular and more popular. So we have visited some big sustainable fora in the world, and there you meet a lot of companies, the usual suspects, but also the unusual suspects. And there is this melting pot of people who are trying to find one another, and companies, they are trying to find programs that can help them to fill this sustainable agenda. And of course, we have something to offer, and there you need to find one another. So I'm so happy to see this. So Unilever and Timberland and Danone and even the evil companies are slowly becoming more sustainable, like Exxon and Shell, etc. And of course, maybe it's still greenwashing, but one day they know that the time of greenwashing is also belongs to the past. So everyone is aware that we need to become sustainable. And what we do, landscape restoration, ecosystem restoration, we touch 8 SDGs in one approach. And that makes us very attractive. And of course, you have now the CO2 credits, which is it's a new currency. So we have something to offer to companies with a strong SDG agenda, especially when they embrace the same topics that like we are trying to solve: water, food, climate, life on land, etc. And that we try to create partnerships with. And I'm very happy that we have managed to create global partnerships. It's not a sponsorship, it's a shared value partnership. They are looking for something, we have something, and the planet is getting better. So it's a win-win-win. And I think that to make it very simple, the Sustainable Development Goal agenda could be a business model.
You've mentioned, we've talked about companies and NGOs. What about governments? I work in the public policy area, so I find it very difficult to deal with governments at times. I mean, you're coming from the Netherlands. From afar, it seems easier, but I'm wondering how does it work in Asia, in Africa, or in other parts of the world where you've been working with governments?
I'm not really interested in politics. I never was, and I never will be, because in my opinion, they always have a short term that they look forward to. So I'm more like the long term. I like to hear more long-term visions. It's slowly changing because they see what kind of world we are living. And in the Netherlands, I hardly have any backup from the government. And I don't think it's necessary, even though I try to involve, I would like to try to involve foreign affairs, because we are now becoming so big in Africa, so many countries would like to work with us. I would like to see that they are involved. But, and then when you go back to Africa, so 30 countries said, yes, we need to have a green revolution. This is a country-led pledge. So governments made this pledge. But between the pledge and between results, there's a big difference. And I've also learned a lot because of traveling to Africa. And that's the opposite of Europe, or maybe not, in my country. But if you want to become wealthy and rich, you should move into politics in Africa. And if you want to become wealthy and rich in the Netherlands, you need to become an entrepreneur. And there it's completely the opposite. So corruption, and especially when you work with programs like we are doing with money, and you need to work with government, it's never sort of easy. So we are not saying that we really want to work with governments in general, but there must be some integer, honest governments in the world that you can really build on. But we try to avoid it.
I feel nobody wants to work with the government, but at one point you can't escape it. It's like taxes and everything you do is somehow regulated.
The power is in the corporate, and the power is in the consumer.
So that's an important point you've made, that the power is in the consumer. Now I'll let consumer ask some questions, because they have the power, right?
Just a second.
Thank you. I think the technology you're having is absolutely fantastic. My question would be, what do you fear more, the rate how climate is changing, and do you think that the technology must be ready to basically cope with the rate climate is changing, or do you think it will be so adaptable that it can always comply basically within the same way how climate is changing?
I try to understand your question. I'm not understanding it 100%, but you are saying something about technical innovation, how important it is related to the climate issue of today?
No, I'm basically meaning that the kind of technology you're using, or like the method that you're using, how afraid are you basically that it cannot can be adapted as quickly as, for example, potential the rate of how climate is changing regions basically, or the climate change is basically changing regions, that you cannot basically adapt quickly enough in these regions?
I'm quite positive about what we are doing, but it's not only what we are doing, because so many other organizations are also doing this. But what is very hopeful is a report that came out 2 years ago from one of the bigger NGOs who has only a focus on nature, and it's called the Nature Conservancy, and they brought out a report after many years of research saying that nature has the biggest and fastest solution to fight climate change. And that's very interesting, because we are talking about we need to take care of Mother Nature, and at the same time she has the solution. And in this report you can read that for 37% she has the solution to really have a positive impact on the climate. So nature-based solutions, and it's only out there now for a year to a more broader world, is a wonderful solution. And of course, next to that, we need to have the clean energy and the windmills and the solars, etc. So we are only a part of the solutions that exist. And there's never a silver bullet, I have learned. And we need to do them all in order to really make a difference. And even though some good stuff is happening, 2 days ago we heard that actually nothing is happening in terms of CO2 emissions. And so And that is what I sort of miss a bit. And I can say this because I'm now 10 years working in this field. I want to hear and see more urgency. Seriously, we are screwed if we are not moving into action ASAP, and especially to all those big corporates, you know, they need to take the responsibility and forget the shareholder, and it's ecosystem payback time. And I think we need to hear more messages like 2 days ago from the UN and today from the EU. So, because I know scientists who say we have 15 years, 1-5, and if within that period we don't see some substantial changes, we're screwed. And there are scientists that even say that as a species, I mean, we are now losing over 1 million species in a very short time, but they say we will also vanish. We will disappear. So destructive are we now to our planet.
Just
Very hopeful.
Just before we take the next question, one thing I know I've learned from Florin, because I know him quite well, is that one of the plants that's been endangered is actually the cocoa plant. So we might not have chocolate in the future for ourselves at an older age or for our kids, and that
That would
might
be a
problem.
nightmare.
I've heard also the tequila worms are dying, so no more tequila, no more chocolate. What world is there to live in?
Any more questions? No, he's not here, unfortunately. I guess he's in traffic. He already left the airport, but I will invite you at the end to actually get in touch with him on a different channel. Are there questions?
If you don't work with the government, how do you make money? What is the business model? How do you make money?
How do I make money?
Yes, like you said you're an entrepreneur, so I suppose that when you're going to Africa, you're not only doing charity work, but you are doing something for profit or something to earn some money with these actions.
Yeah.
How?
I am not interested in profit, but then again, we have now 20 people working for our NGO, and of course they need to have a salary. So my model has always been, and still is, that I always try to find the wealthy families with family offices and foundations, and I always ask them for seed capital to help us start for at least a few years, and then I will show them where we will get the money from so that we don't need them after a few years anymore. And that works. And what I just said, our ultimate business model and most of the money will come from big corporates, besides big institutes like the Green Climate Fund or other big well-known funds. Because those funds exist to only put the money there that creates impact. And the Green Climate Fund is one of the biggest funds in the world. You all pay for this Green Climate Fund because it's tax money. All the countries in the world are putting money in this fund. There needs to be 100 billion per year starting in the year 2022. Money is not an issue. There's so much money, sort of too much money. But then again, to get money from an organization like the Green Climate Fund, wow, that takes a long time. And therefore you need to have those families who believe in your vision so that they help you with time to make sure that you will finally get the money from that Green Climate Fund. And I already wanted to have this money in the year 2013, and only 4 months ago it happened. So you need to have a long breath, and you just don't need to give up. And I just received almost 3 million, and it's not even the money, it's the fact that we got money from this Green Climate Fund, and that makes us now credible in the world that I'm working with. So it's a blended finance of family offices, foundations, the big financial institutes, and corporates, because the Sustainable Development Agenda, the goals, that's a business model on itself.
We have another question there.
Hi, thank you very much for lovely info about Africa. I'm looking into Africa for a while now, and I'm really interested about what is happening there.
Where?
I've been looking actually more on the textile industry around Africa. It's really developing a lot. And actually, I wanted to ask you about how much is Just Digging doing to doing to share your experience and your know-how with other initiatives around the globe that are doing the same thing or something similar. Do you feel like you're sharing enough? Do you keep in contact with other initiatives like that? Do you exchange information and help each other out? Or how is it working?
Good question.
Thank you.
And I like your dress. Is that a traditional, beautiful Romanian dress? It's very cool. Yeah, so that's a good question. So we don't say that we have all the knowledge, but we know now quite some things, basic needs, that can really be helpful to so many people. So we are building this technical platform. We create a beautiful app. We have been building this for 3 years. And this will be brought to the world, to farmers and to consumers, and then we create connections between them, and then we teach farmers how they can implement certain techniques, quite simple, to transform those dry lands into green fields again. And in Africa, we try to build a blueprint, a sort of a handbook. And this handbook will be handed over to countries, to governments and NGOs, in a firm belief that if they follow this handbook, beautiful changes will happen. And because of working now with some big international NGOs, maybe we can make sure that this sort of blueprint handbook will be spread also in other continents. So we definitely are thinking global, but you always start to act local, and then what we really try to do is to think out of networks. So we try to have really a big reach, to really think about who can help us in the most efficient, easy way to have a big impact in another country or in another continent. It's much more easier being said than done. It always takes a lot of time.
Are there any more questions?
Yes, please.
Hello, thank you for your message of hope, but also a good reality check. I'm curious, as you transitioned from the corporate world into the work that you're doing now, what were the biggest surprises, but also the skills that help you the most?
Now, the surprise, I know, the surprise for me is that finally the corporates are ready to do something for a better planet. And I just said that we are drifting away from a digital revolution to a purpose revolution. We just really entered the purpose revolution. I'm convinced, I see it, I feel it, I hear it, and and that's very hopeful. So the big corporates are aware, just like she was saying as an example, maybe there will be no cacao, so Nestle and Mars, they have big issues if they are not taking care of sustainable land in order to create this cacao, because otherwise there will be no Mars or other chocolate products. You said surprise, and you said The skills, yeah. Well, what we are good at, because we are this small and we just created some global partnerships with Timberland for 5 years, with Tommy Hilfiger, and there's more to come. Our skills is that we are really good in storytelling. So we really know how a corporate operates, how it thinks, and then we prepare a case specifically for them, and then already did some good fact-checking and really did some good research. You know, what is their sustainable agenda? What makes them tick? What is interesting for them? And then we always have wonderful quality of presentations that we bring to them. And of course, then it's a combination of factors, you know, it's how you sell it and what you say, even body language, everything counts. But as soon as you really have found some corporates with sort of shared values, yeah, then you can build a case and sell the case. And we are quite good in making it relevant, attractive, and then also able to sell it.
Are there any more questions? No? Okay, there is one more.
In this whole speech about climate change and sustainability, there is also this trend that we should change it at individual level, like consuming less meat, recycling, zero waste movement. Do you think it is important, and how important?
Very much important. Yeah, so the answer is yes. It's a no-brainer. Everyone can do something. Start with solar on your house, or drive electric, or eat less meat, and that's what I'm saying. We just entered the purpose revolution. Who did see the movie Game Changer already on Netflix? 2. That was a fantastic movie, wasn't it? Yeah, so this film, Game Changer, as an example, what is happening into the world, will really become a change maker. Or sorry, game changer. And I've seen it myself, and the funny thing is that what you see and hear in this movie is not really sort of new, but they tweaked it a little bit and they make it more urgent, more relevant, more attractive. They make it also even sort of playful. And as soon as you've seen the movie, I promise you, you want to become vegan. You want to only eat plant-based food. And I'm quite a big meat eater. Not anymore. It started already, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So less and less meat. I haven't had pork for a few years. And so chicken and fish. And then after the movie, I was like, shit, I need also to stop with chicken and fish. So it's a fascinating time. We are in an awakening, and we need to have it faster. So therefore, this kind of movies and the work that we are doing, and so many good stuff is happening. But on an individual level, yeah, you can really change a lot. But it's so difficult to really change your own behavior. That's one of the most difficult things for human beings, because we had such a luxury life. Everything was there, and now suddenly we are aware. Oh, it's not endless, and we need to change. And so it's not going to be easy. So therefore, these kind of new movies and the repetition of bringing out those messages, it's very much needed. And that's what I also believe in: the power of communication, even branding, and like what we are doing. So it's very important to bring out the solutions for everyone, so that everyone can do something for ourselves instead of the planet. Because the planet, she will always be there. It's more for ourselves.
Thank you. I'm glad we finished in such a positive and inspirational mode, I guess. And just before we finish the session, I will want to wrap up with a few ideas I've taken for myself at home from that. So, drive is all you need to change at personal level and at large scale level as well. He's not an engineer or has no studies when it comes to land restoration. However, he's leading one of the largest projects in the field. So motivation is more important. And surrounding yourself with the better people than yourself. We are actually living a climate emergency situation, and we are not doing enough ASAP. We are not talking enough about it, but here we are today talking about it, and I hope we'll actually take these ideas from here to our friends, to our family, and discuss more about it. We need to think more of how we offer, what we offer to companies whenever we have solutions. There are plenty of money out there, because we are also living the purpose revolution, and it's people-driven purpose and it's company-driven purpose. And the companies are actually pushed by the consumers. Consumers have the power, you have the power, we all have the power. And also to think that nature has the solution. So whenever we are in doubt, we should go back to nature. These are my thoughts from today. I thank Dennis. I hope he will be back to Bucharest. I didn't have the chance to ask him if Ajax Amsterdam won the game last night. Did it?
We won 2-0, so yes, we are.
So good luck in Bucharest. So we hope he'll come back here next time for Ajax to win the game.
Thank you for your interest. And,
Thank you for your interest being staying so late with us.
Thank you, Adelina and Dennis.